So to get back now for our regularly scheduled programming, stop complimenting you. It's time for work. So one of the things we do in the gathering is have times together called series. Series are opportunities for us to focus on some things a little bit more heavily, a little bit more intensely. And we're doing, I got to tell you right now, the gathering is in many ways, the gathering is one huge ruse. It's one huge bait and switch. Because I promise you, the reason we keep growing, the reason we have so many people, the reason we're now 2 services in Wesley Hall is because people keep inviting people. I swear someone probably invited you. And when they did, they probably said something along the lines of, you should come to the gathering. It's really casual. It's really easy to get into. There's food. I mean, you've heard all these. This is what they said to you, right? Is this how they invited you? There's going to be food. It's laid back. You can drink coffee during it. And it's welcoming, and you're going to like it. We do all of that. And in so many ways, the gathering is just low bar to entry. It's going to be hospitable. You're going to feel comfortable. And then you come in, and do you realize we will then immediately, bang, hit you with like really heavy theology, right? Like where it's like, oh, come have a cup of coffee and a kolache, and then here's a dissertation on atonement for 4 weeks. No big deal. Enjoy. It's going to be easy, right? It's a huge bait and switch. We will cover in the ruse of like the guy with the untucked shirt, right? You think this is a safe place? No, we're going to be talking about Greek stuff today, right? We won't, but I want to. Right? The gathering tackles really serious topics, right? We'll go really in depth. And one of the things that we're talking about incredibly in depth over the course of this entire week is a concept called, or the entire month, is a concept called atonement, right? Atonement. We talked about atonement last week. Atonement literally just means at one mint. Atonement means at one mint. It means making something that had been broken whole again, specifically a relationship. Right? An interaction, making something that had been broken, had been torn inside, making it whole again. And we're doing this because we're focusing on how the cross works. Right? The cross is the central focus of our faith. Without the cross, there's no resurrection. Right? So the cross is so central to our understanding. Think of all the diversity in all the different Christian traditions and all the different churches, not just in Fort Worth, but around the world. And not just now, but for the last 2,000 years. Think about all of that diversity, all of those different cultures, all of those different languages, all of those different traditions, and every single one is in lockstep in agreement that Jesus' death on the cross is key to our reconciliation and salvation before God, right? All of the different theologies, all of the different understandings, everyone is in lockstep agreement that that is the case. And so, how? Right? How is it that happens, right? How is it that that's the mechanism through which God forgives and through which God saves and through which we receive redemption and reconciliation? How? Right? And so that's what we're talking about over the course of the month of June, because there's nothing people love more than sweating than heavy theology. And that's why I marry them. Give the people what they want, right? 90-degree weather plus really hard church. So that's what we're doing. I'm trying to preach this church down to 0, but y'all keep coming. So we talked about the concept of atonement, right? This concept of atonement, of making things right? Of reconciliation, of fixing a relationship. And if the mechanism through which God does this is the cross. The cross of Christ, right, is what actually, through which we achieve salvation, we achieve forgiveness, we achieve reconciliation, we experience all that God is promising and offering to us. The cross is key to that. So if cross is the solution and atonement is what God is working for, then what's the problem? And we talked about that last week. I got to tell y'all, when I asked that question rhetorically, I was like, so if that's the problem, if that's the solution, then what's the problem? And I turn around and the entire 11 o'clock gathering goes, sin! Before I even said it, which is a weird moment as a preacher, when your church is just yelling sin out at you. I guess you're doing a good job. If that's the solution, sin's the problem, right? Sin's the problem. And last week, we talked about, I need you to understand, sin is so much more than just the stuff I've done wrong, right? Sin is just it's so much more than my own laundry list of regrets. Right? Sin is so much more than the times where I fell short, right? Or the times I was dishonest, or the times in which I prioritized myself over other people, or the times in which I let other people down, or the times in which I hurt other people, or the times in which I failed to honor the image of God present in other people, where I failed to be the avenue for forgiveness and mercy that God would have me be. Sin is so much more than just my individual failings, my individual missteps, right? Because every moment of sin in your life and everybody else's life, it spreads, right? It spreads. It creates more brokenness. And the hurting other people, it makes them hurt people, and hurt people do what? They hurt people, right? Hurt people. It creates this web of hurt and mistrust. And all of a sudden, what was going on in an individual's life is now going on in a family's life. What was going on in a family's life is now going on in a community's life. What was going on in a community's life is now going on in the marketplace's life. What's going on in that life is now going on in the world, right? Over and over and over again, you have this web that is just spreading, this influence that's growing, and it becomes really hard for individuals to be free of it, no matter how moral they are, no matter how good they are, no matter how upright they are still caught in this world that is just sinking farther and farther and farther away from the God who created it to be so much different and better than that. So, one of the huge fringe benefits of my job here at this church, one of the best parts of being appointed to serve at First United Methodist Church, Fort Worth, do y'all have little rituals in your job where it's like you're working, but you're not really working? Do y'all have that? Is that just me? We're being vulnerable here then. My favorite thing to do, if y'all have known me, I'm a city guy. I really love cities. I really love nature as long as that nature is one tree and it's planted in the ground surrounded by concrete. That's what I like. I really love cities. I really love people. I love the energy of it. I find it so energizing and warm and good. It makes me really happy. And so one of the things I get to do here at this church is if I have a hole in my schedule, if I have an opportunity, I can go for a walk in the city, right? And the best thinking and the best planning and the best writing I do always happens to happen when I'm walking. And so it was about Tuesday this week, and the weather was still kind of nice in the morning. I had a hole in my schedule, and so I'm heading out for a walk. Right? I'm just going to go cruise through downtown Fort Worth, take a half hour, get some of my steps in. And by the way, 18,000 on a Sunday. I move around a lot. Rest of the week, about 5,000. So I need to go out and get my steps in. I'm going for a walk, and I just head downtown, and I take a left at some point. And so I'm walking, and I see a whole crowd of people, right, out on the sidewalk. And it's unusual, right? Because they're just kind of like chilling. They're standing around. And so I end up discovering, as I walk past it, there were signs on the door. They were having like an evacuation drill. Like whoever owns the building was just having a drill where they all got to go step outside and all that kind of stuff. And so they were doing that. And it was just fascinating as I'm walking by because, of course, I do what anybody else does when you walk by a crowd of people, and that is look them all up and down, kind of judge them. And not in a bad way, just like get to know them, you know? And figure out who they are. And so I'm looking at this crowd of people, and I'm realizing this building, I didn't realize how diverse this building was. Because it's kind of like a she address. And so it's got some people there who are obviously kind of she, and they live in that she place. And so they're out on the street, and they're looking she. They look fancy. And they're trying to look fancy. It's okay. And so they're out there. And then there's also a bunch of white-collar workers who are out there. Men and women in suits and ties and things like that. And they're obviously white-collar workers. They've had to leave their office building, and they're downstairs. Some of them have briefcases. Some of them have purses. They're all on the sidewalk, and they're mixed in with the people who are obviously residents there. And then additionally, there's some the people out there who are the facilities people of the building, the blue-collar workers there. There's also a bunch of blue-collar workers, back-of-house people, busboys, things like that, out of the restaurant, right? And they're all kind of commingled together. And they're all just standing there, and they all spend their lives, right, in this same address in the city of Fort Worth. And it was such an awesome vision of what the world is like, right? Because I'm walking past this place. There's a number of different ethnicities. I hear a number of different languages. There's people of all different ages, all different backgrounds, and they're all bound together here, right in this very same space. This very image of what the kingdom of heaven looks like, right? All these people kind of gathered together. This incredible diversity. And I'm walking around, and it has made me think about all of the diversity that I've seen in all my years of just walking around downtown Fort Worth, right? Did any of y'all work downtown or get to come downtown a lot? I've seen so many things. Remember the big Tube the City event they had down Main Street? There were like 2,000 people in bathing suits holding tubes downtown. Did y'all see that? No? Come downtown more. There's a lot of crazy stuff. My favorite thing is on Saturdays during the summer or during the fall when the football games are happening and everyone comes downtown. You get to see all the bandwagon fans in their Alabama gear just walking all over Sundance Square. Bless their hearts. Right? You get to see all of that. There's a comic convention happening in there's a Comic-Con happening downtown in the comic convention right now. I saw Pikachu yesterday just walking around in front of God and everybody, right? Like, how cool is that? There's so many different kinds of people. I gotta tell you, my all-time favorite person I've ever seen in downtown Fort Worth, I was driving into work, so it was about 8 o'clock in the morning, and it was over by the Clyburn, you know, when they had just painted the piano steps and everything. And I'm at a red light, and I see two ladies, probably about my age or a little bit younger, and they're just kind of hanging out, walking around in the morning. I happen to notice one of them just seemed really dressed up. She had lots of layers. I equate layers with dressing up. Like once you've got 3 on, you're trying. And so she's got layers on, and she's got her floppy hat in millennial pink, and they're doing that, and she's hanging out with her friend, and the light turns green, and friend 1 runs ahead and stops and cell phone, right? And gets ready. And friend 2, floppy hat McLayers, she walks, she gets halfway, she does this, and freezes in the middle of the street. And friend 1 has her cell phone and goes snap, 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 snap. And then friend 2 takes another step and goes and freezes. And it was the funniest thing I've ever seen in my entire life. Because it was like 7:50 in the morning, right? I'm so impressed because she spent like 2 hours getting ready for her 7:50 Instagram photo shoot, right? I'm so impressed with that. And it just made me think, I'm reflecting, I don't know why I was thinking about that this week. I just really wanted to do an impression. That was a gift for me. Thank you. But think of all these images, right? All these different people that surround my own city, right? Our own community, our very church, right? The people that surround it, all different walks of life, all different experiences of life. Look at the incredible diversity of these people. All of them with different stories, all of them with different decisions, all of them with different backgrounds, all of them with different families of origin, all of them with different religious understandings and understandings of themselves, and all of them equally are seen by God in desperate need of being saved, of being reconciled, of being removed from this system of sin and death that's not just going on in their lives, but is going on all around them. Each and every one of them is in desperate need, right? And look at this from God's perspective, if you would. Look at this from God's perspective. What is it that each and every one of these people need? And God looks at them, all of them, loves them, cares for them, knit them together in the womb, would do anything for them. God sees them lost and says they need direction. And God sees them vulnerable. God sees them vulnerable of falling for less than, right? Of being swallowed up in a world that tells them that the only thing you're good for is how much money you make or your social status or how many likes you get on that picture, right? God sees them vulnerable to that and says they need protection. And God sees all of these relationships in a world that's so broken, that has fallen so far away from who God made it to be, right? That is so distant from what God desires, that is such an offense, honestly. All the love and all of the care and all of the mercy and all of the work that God has put into it, God needs satisfaction. Satisfaction. You might not think of it that way. I just fell in love with the alliteration, direction, protection. I had to say satisfaction. Satisfaction just means to take something that's broken, make it right. To take a debt that's owed and get it settled up. Right? That's what satisfaction means. And the person that is capable of doing this, the person who's capable of providing this, the person who is capable of giving the direction to all those people, not only in Fort Worth, Texas in 2018 on a June, but also 2,000 years ago in the ancient Near East, also 2,000 years from now in all different kinds of communities, the person who's able to do that is Jesus Christ. The person who's able to offer them protection, who's able to save them from what surrounds them, the person who's able to give them more, to pull them away from what would consume and devour them is Jesus Christ. And the person who's capable of taking that debt and making it whole is him as well. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Because last week we talked about sin and how God is going to save us from it, right? How that's the problem. What's God's solution? Now it enters Jesus. So when we talk about the work of direction, us desperately needing direction, this is when we talk about Christ's prophetic work. In case you're the kind of person who likes to go behind the preacher and double check his or her work, John Deschner's book, Wesley's Christology. You can read that up and double check with me. I just don't want you to think I'm making up atonement language as I go, right? This is all core Methodism. This is all writings of John Wesley that we're kind of talking about today in a little bit more approachable way. Prophetic work is Jesus' revealing work, right? It's Jesus' work of teaching. It's Jesus' work of showing. It's Jesus' work of explaining. It's Jesus' work of guiding. God so looks at these people and they so desperately need better answers. They so desperately need to have the right way illuminated 2,000 years ago and today. Us, them, everybody so desperately needs to be shown the right direction away from the sin instead that's consuming them. And that's what Jesus does over and over and over again. Our scripture reading today is going to be from the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 5. This is one of the most foundational teachings in the Christian text. This is the beginning of what we call the Sermon on the Mount. The Sermon on the Mount is Jesus' largest unbroken time of teaching. And what Jesus is talking about in the Sermon on the Mount is explaining what the world is actually like. He's explaining to the people who gathered around that building earlier this week that here is what the world is actually like. Here is what you actually need to know. The rules of sin and death and separation and alienation from God that are so common, that surround you, that weigh you down every single day, they are false. Here is what is true. Here's what you need to know, he says. And he begins by saying, he's talking about here's how you actually live in fullness. Here's how you actually experience what you're really looking for. Here's the actual answer to what you're searching for. Happy are people who are hopeless, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs, he says. You look at people who seem to be hopeless, who seem to be let down, who seem to be falling behind, and you just pity them or give up on them. Understand that those are the people who are capable of seeing most clearly who God really is, he says. Happy are people who grieve, because they will be made glad. Happy are those whose hearts are breaking because of loss or what the world is like all around them, because theirs will be the prayers that are answered. They will have good news. Happy are people who are humble, because they will inherit the earth. Happy are people who are hungry and thirsty for righteousness, because they will be fed until they are full. Happy are people who show mercy, because they will receive mercy. Happy are people who have pure hearts, because they will see God. Happy are people who make peace, because they will be called God's children. Happy are people whose lives are harassed, because they are righteous, because the kingdom of heaven is theirs. God speaks to us through the reading of Scripture. He's teaching, he's showing, he's revealing. You have all of this evidence that seems to say the world is like this, and all of that is just leading you farther and farther away from whom God would have you be. In his time and place, even the people who are trying so desperately to live righteously in the way that they treat themselves and the way that they treat other people, even in their religious observation, all they're really doing is exercising their own ego, their own vanity, their own sense of superiority over the rest of the world. They need a prophet. They need real direction to show them who God is and what God is actually all about. And only Jesus Christ can do that. He continues on. He keeps flipping the script in so many ways. He goes on through that in chapter 5, verse 38. You have heard that it was said, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. It makes perfect sense, right? Of course that makes sense. It's even. It's fair. But I say to you, you must not oppose those who want to hurt you. If people slap you on your right cheek, you must turn the left cheek to them as well. When they wish to haul you to court and take your shirt, let them have your coat too. When they force you to go 1 mile, go with them too. Give to those who ask and don't refuse those who wish to borrow from you. You have heard that it was said, you must love your neighbor and hate your enemy. But I say to you, love your enemies and pray for those who harass you, so that you will be acting as children of your Father who is in heaven. He's teaching. He's giving direction. He's revealing. Do you see? He's revealing another way of being. Do you see? He's revealing a new way away from all that has led people astray and toward the heart of God that is loving and calling out to them. He's giving this direction. He goes on with ways to worship. He goes on with ways to organize your marriages. He goes on teaching and revealing, all for the purposes of guiding people away from that which would kill and destroy them. You and I need that direction, and we get it from Jesus, but we need something else. We need something that can actually protect us. We need something that's strong enough. We need something that's strong enough that when things are falling apart, we can actually rely on. Do you hear me? We, each and every one of me and you, need something that we can actually make the foundation of our lives, that we can actually believe when we are in the hospital room by somebody's side. We need something that we actually know is reliable when the bank account is heading past zero. We need something that we know is true when the relationship that we have counted on our entire lives is falling apart. We need something that we know is more powerful than anything else that we are facing. That is what we call Jesus' kingly work. Christ is king. And king means so much more than just ruler, right? King means so much more than just CEO. King means so much more than the person who makes the laws. King is the person who's in control. King is the person whose way rules. King is the person whose power presides over everything, and Christ is our king. We're in John really quickly. If you have your Bibles with you, it's in 1833. Pilate went back into the palace. This is when Jesus is being interrogated shortly before his death. He summoned Jesus and asked, "Are you the king of the Jews?" Jesus answered, "Do you say this on your own, or have others spoken this to you about me?" "How do you know?" he's asking him. Pilate responded, "I'm not a Jew, am I? Your nation and its chief priests handed you over to me. What have you done?" Jesus replied, "My kingdom doesn't originate from this world. If it did, my guards would fight so that I wouldn't have been arrested by the Jewish leaders. My kingdom isn't from here." "So are you a king?" Pilate asked. Jesus answered, "You say that I am a king. I was born and came into the world for this reason, to testify to the truth. Whoever accepts the truth listens to my voice." Christ the King is the Christ whose power is not limited by this world. Are greater. What we need, each and every one of us, is protection from the things that would devour and destroy. Right? The things that would just slowly eat up our life from inside out, from the things that would tell us that we're less than, that our addiction can't be beaten, that we are limited by who likes us or who appreciates us. Christ's power is greater and richer and stronger and promises to be there for you no matter what. The problem is sin. And God sees each and every one of those people, right? Each and every one of those people surrounding that building earlier this week, and knows that they are constantly being drawn farther and farther away from God, and they need something that is greater, that promises something more. They need something that promises life eternal, that they can actually rely on, actually trust, actually know is true. And that is what Jesus does. So what about the last thing? What about this final thing? What about this thing that actually takes something that's broken and makes it right? What about something that actually takes the debt and repays it? Right? Who takes something that's spun out of control for millions of years, undoes the debt, and creates a fresh start? Who can do that? And how? And how? That sounds like something for next week. But know this. If this is the problem, right, God is looking at each and every person in this room today, 200 of you gathered in this place, including especially me, and each and every one of us has something in our past. And each and every one of us has fallen short. And each and every one of us has left someone else behind. But even more than that, we can so easily be caught up in a web that just tells us over and over again that we're not worthy, that we're not good enough, that we're ugly, that we're broken, that we deserve this, that this is as good as it will ever get, that if you want anything worth having, you need to take it from somebody else. Those are the lessons over and over again that the world is telling us. God sees us and says they need direction, true knowledge, a clear understanding of who God really is, what life is really about, and the only way to actually fill that yearning inside of them. And they need protection. They need something that's true. They need something that they can rely on. They need a promise of life eternal that will be there for each and every one of them, no matter what. And so God gives us Jesus. So we get Jesus so that we may know, so that we may trust, so that we may believe, and so that we may experience what God made each and every one of us for. Not because of who we are. Not because of who we are, but because of who God is. Leave here knowing this. Your God will stop at nothing. Your God will stop at nothing to know you, to save you, and to redeem you now and every day of your life. Please pray with me. Great and loving God, the story of our atonement, the story of us in right relationship with you, the story of not only forgiveness of sins, of direction away from sins, of protection from sins, the story of us is rooted in your Son, Jesus the Christ. God, in him, you give us what we need. When we yearn for strength, God, when we yearn for answered prayers, when we yearn to know how to face another day, God, we receive that in Jesus. Help us today, God, to know and to trust, to build our lives upon that firm foundation, and in everything we do, to believe in the work and the promises you made through him. And it's in his name that together we pray the words that he taught us to pray, saying, Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, and the power, and the glory forever. Amen.